He ignored his own daughter's pleas, claiming his lover's child was desperately ill. As he raced to save a phantom sickness, his real daughter slipped beneath the water, alone. He had no idea his wife, the CEO of the Vance conglomerate, had just watched him make his final, fatal mistake. His ruin was already in motion. Liam's devotion to the child who was not his own was not merely a tragic flaw, it was a gravitational pull, steadily pulling his gaze away from the life he had sworn to protect, until the threads connecting him to his own daughter, Lily, were strained and frayed to the breaking point. He moved through the house with the frantic energy of a man perpetually racing against a clock he couldn't see, but always heard ticking. That morning, like every morning, the urgency was for Emma. Aria sat at the kitchen island, meticulously arranging a bowl of sliced strawberries for Lily. She did not need to look up to know the precise angle of stress etched onto Liam's forehead, or the way his usually commanding voice softened into an anxious plea when addressing his phone. "Yes, the dosage is critical, Chloe. I'm leaving now. I'll be back before Lily wakes up," he murmured into the receiver, snatching his car keys and a small, insulated medical cooler from the counter. The refrigerator door had been left slightly ajar, a minor oversight that Aria silently reached out to correct. A small, quiet sound interrupted his rush. 6-year-old Lily stood hesitantly by the archway, her worn copy of Times The Secret Garden Times clutched in her hands. Her eyes, wide and hopeful, were fixed on her father's retreating back. "Daddy? Can you read the chapter about the robin today? Just the first page?" Lily's voice was softer than the morning dew outside, a sound that often went unregistered in the expensive, soundproofed spaces of their home. Liam stopped, momentarily interrupted by the mundane request. He glanced back, not seeing his daughter, but seeing an obstacle, a delay to the true mission. "Not now, sweetheart. Daddy has an urgent errand," Liam said, his tone clipped but dismissive. Already halfway out the door, "Emma needs her special medication immediately. It can't wait. Not even for 5 minutes." "But it's just 1 page," Lily persisted, her lower lip beginning to tremble, recognizing the familiar pattern of rejection. Aria's hand tightened around the ceramic mug. She caught Lily's eye, offering a small, sad smile. The silent promise that she would read the story later, the way she always did. But Lily didn't want Aria. Lily wanted her father, the one figure in her short life who consistently failed to look her way. "Lily, go play with your dolls. This is life or death, do you understand?" Liam snapped, the stress overriding his meager patience. He didn't wait for an answer. The front door slammed shut, followed instantly by the aggressive roar of his luxury sedan peeling out of the driveway, the sound echoing Chloe's perpetual sense of emergency. Aria watched the empty space where her husband had stood, the cold residue of his urgency hanging in the air. Asterisk. Life or death. Asterisk. That had been the justification for everything for the past 3 years. She remembered the night Chloe had first entered their lives. Not as a woman, but as a weeping calamity. Chloe had presented the perfect weapon, a sick, innocent child. Asterisk. It had been a bitter, rainy evening. Asterisk. Liam returned from a mysterious business trip, his face pale and stricken. Asterisk. Asterisk. Aria. You don't understand. Emma has a severe myocardial defect. The doctors say she might not make it past 8 without a miracle. She's so fragile, he'd choked out, the confession of his infidelity hidden beneath a tide of false paternal concern. Asterisk. Asterisk. Chloe, strategically placed nearby, had looked ethereal and tragic, her daughter Emma, then 4 years old, clinging weakly to her side. The pity, the urgency, the sheer times that Chloe projected had completely ensnared Liam. Asterisk. He saw himself not as an unfaithful husband, but as a savior, the only man capable of providing the constant, specialized care Emma required. Asterisk. Asterisk. Aria, the quiet, observant wife, had accepted the narrative without public challenge. Asterisk. She had nodded, packed a small bag, and allowed him to set up Chloe and Emma in a separate luxury apartment, claiming the constant hospital visits required proximity to the city center. Asterisk. The lie, Aria knew now, was the foundation of the ruin. Liam genuinely believed that Emma's fragile heart was ticking down, while Chloe meticulously pulled the strings, ensuring Liam remained locked in the savior role. And in his obsessive devotion to the counterfeit tragedy, he completely overlooked the real vibrant life fading slowly beside him. Lily walked over to Aria, her book still unopened. "Emma is always sick, Mama. Why doesn't Daddy worry when I cough?" Aria knelt, gently smoothing Lily's hair. "Daddy is worried about his work, my sweet girl. Let's read about the robin, shall we?" Aria read the words, her voice steady and soothing, but her mind was calculating. She was the picture of the traditional, devoted wife, elegant, impeccably dressed, and seemingly without ambition beyond managing their sprawling home. Liam had always seen her as subservient, someone content with the luxury her silence afforded. He believed she had no family of consequence. Having been estranged from her father, Thomas Vance, years ago, he was wrong. Profoundly, dangerously wrong. Aria knew how to read the market, how to dismantle a company with surgical precision, and how to track down the hidden truths behind carefully constructed medical lies. She had inherited more than just her mother's sharp features. She carried the strategic, ruthless brilliance of Thomas Vance, CEO of the Vance conglomerate, the man who could crash Liam's entire world with a single phone call. Right now, she was only the quiet wife, but the moment Liam's neglect crossed the line from emotional cruelty into fatal error, Aria Vance would rise. She finished the page, kissing Lily good morning, her eyes meeting the clock on the wall. The time was 8:05 a.m., the countdown to catastrophe, though only visible to Aria, had already begun. She had only to wait for Liam to make his final fatal choice. The clock in the kitchen ticked toward 8:30 a.m., a steady, monotonous sound that failed to register the seismic shift occurring just beyond the glass doors. Aria had retreated to the study, preparing a brief for her father's firm, a task she usually reserved for the evenings but now felt compelled to execute. She was waiting, but the silence inside was about to be broken by a lie, obscuring the truth outside. Lily, tired of the robin, wandered through the cool, marble hallway toward the conservatory, drawn by the bright, deceptive sparkle of the morning sun, reflecting off the azure water of the infinity pool. The water was her favorite shade of blue. She saw her inflatable unicorn, a beloved toy, bobbing precariously near the deep end. The pool area was expansive, designed for grand parties and adult leisure, not 6-year-old retrieval missions. Lily knelt on the smooth stone coping, leaning out as far as her small body would allow, stretching her fingers toward the plastic horn. The stone was slick with morning dew that the sun had not yet burned off. Her sneakers found no purchase. There was a sudden, sickening slide, a small intake of breath, and then the muffled plop times as Lily tumbled in. The water was shockingly cold. She thrashed instinctively, her small lungs immediately inhaling a mouthful of the chlorinated liquid. She wasn't a strong swimmer, and the panic was immediate, a blinding white noise that stole her coordination. She tried to cry out for her father, the one sound she had always hoped would bring him running, but only a desperate gurgle escaped, swallowed instantly by the large pool. Her arms clawed weakly at the surface, catching nothing but air and water. She kicked, desperate to stay afloat, managing only to push herself closer to the slick, unyielding wall where her fingers scrabbled uselessly. A tiny, flailing hand rose above the surface for one brief, frantic second, a silent, desperate plea reaching only the empty blue sky. At that exact critical moment, the internal alarm of the house shattered the stillness. A shrill, hysterical shriek tore through the air, emanating not from the pool, but from the speakerphone Liam had left on the kitchen counter after his errand. It was Chloe. Liam, get back here. It's Emma, her heart, she's collapsed. I told you the medication wasn't enough, she's turning blue, she can't breathe." Chloe's voice was a masterful performance of pure, raw terror, overriding all rational thought. Liam, who had just pulled his sedan back into the garage, planning to quickly grab a work file, froze. The mention of Emma's heart condition, the chronic fabricated threat that dominated his life, snapped him into a cold sweat. He dropped the file and sprinted through the main house, his heart pounding with the terror of failure. He burst into the living room, eyes wide and unfocused. He saw nothing but the emergency unfolding in his mind. Emma, fragile and dying. He didn't see the sliding glass doors that offered a clear view of the pool. His path was directed purely toward the car he had just left. As he pounded past the window, a flicker of movement, a brief ripple in the water, perhaps the sight of a small, wet hand, beginning its final descent registered on the periphery of his vision. But it was fleeting, trivial, easily dismissed as a stray reflection or the motion of the automatic pool cleaner. Asterisk. It can't wait. Not even for 5 minutes. Asterisk. His own earlier voice echoed in his head. But now the urgency was magnified 1,000-fold. He snatched the keys again and shouted into the empty house. Aria, call the ambulance. I'm taking Emma to St. Jude's. She needs the pediatric cardiac unit. He didn't wait for Aria's reply from the study. He didn't listen for a sound. He didn't even notice the small, worn copy of Times, the Secret Garden Times, lying forgotten on the kitchen island. He threw himself into the driver's seat, the engine of the luxury sedan, a machine designed for quiet speed, roared to life, a deep, aggressive sound that vibrated the very foundations of the house. With a screech of tires on the paved driveway, Liam was gone, driven by the manufactured fear of Chloe's voice and the false weight of the savior complex. Outside, the noise of the departing car was deafening. The sound waves traveled across the pristine garden, vibrating the air, but they did not reach the water. Lily, 6 years old, was suspended silently beneath the surface of the pool. The light from above was beginning to dim, turning the azure water a soft, terrifying shade of jade. Her mouth opened in a final, soundless gasp, a desperate prayer addressed to a father who had sped away to save a life that was never in danger, leaving the true life he had created to sink into the quiet, cold embrace of the deep end. The last of the small silver bubbles drifted upward, popped on the silent surface, and disappeared. The pool was still. The only evidence that anything tragic had occurred was the gentle, rhythmic bobbing of a plastic unicorn, caught in the widening, circular wake of a life that was now lost. Aria emerged from the cool, intellectual quiet of the study, the legal brief neatly organized on her tablet. The air in the house felt unusually thick. She noticed the slight smear of mud Lily must have tracked onto the pristine white marble floor near the kitchen, a minor imperfection usually addressed immediately by the staff, who were currently out on their half-day. She paused by the kitchen island. Asterisk. The Secret Garden Times lay open, face down, forgotten. A terrible cold dread coiled in her stomach, a feeling utterly distinct from the low thrum of marital misery. It was the sudden sharp silence that alarmed her most. Lily was a whirlwind of soft noise, humming, shuffling, whispering secrets to her dolls. This absolute stillness was wrong. Aria walked toward the conservatory, her heart rate accelerating. The glass doors offered a panoramic view of the manicured lawn and the vast, unsettlingly tranquil pool. Her gaze immediately locked onto the inflatable unicorn, still gently rocking near the deep end, and then she saw the hand. It was small, pale, and suspended just beneath the surface, barely visible against the azure bottom. A child's hand, motionless. Aria did not scream. The world around her did not slow or spin. It merely fractured into 1,000 pieces of icy clarity. She moved with the horrifying efficiency of a woman whose deepest, most repressed fear had just materialized. Kicking off her delicate suede loafers, she sprinted across the stone coping. She did not hesitate, plunging into the shockingly cold water, her elegant silk dress instantly heavy and binding. She reached Lily in 2 powerful strokes, pulling the limp, silent body to the edge. Lily was heavy and terrifyingly still. Her lips were blue, her eyes half open, fixed on nothing. Aria hauled her daughter onto the stone and began chest compressions, her movements automatic, fueled by panic and a terrifying, searing rage directed solely at the absent father. Asterisk. He left her. He left her for a lie. Asterisk. She checked Lily's airway, delivered desperate breaths, but the water that came out was mixed with bile and air, not hope. Minutes, hours passed in this desperate, futile cycle. When she finally bundled Lily into the car, wrapping the soaked body in a thick beach towel, Aria did not call an ambulance. She knew she needed to drive. She needed speed, certainty, and an immediate destination. St. Jude's, the same hospital Liam had raced to, convinced his savior role was necessary. The drive was a blur of traffic laws ignored and silent pleas. When they arrived at St. Jude's emergency room, Aria's voice was a ragged whisper, as she thrust Lily into the hands of the triage nurse. Drowning. 6 years old. Please. The next 30 minutes were an eternity constructed of bright white lights, flashing monitors, and the urgent, dispassionate voices of medical staff. Aria stood in the corridor, drenched and shivering. Not from the cold but from the internal shock. She prayed for the one sound she needed to hear. A strong heartbeat. A young doctor approached her, his face grave and compassionate, wiping his hands clean of the impossible task. Mrs. Vance? Aria didn't move. The answer already imprinted on her soul. I am so sorry, the doctor said gently. We exhausted all protocols. Time of death. 9:18 a.m. Accidental drowning. She was submerged too long. The world did not crash. It simply emptied. Aria looked at the doctor, her expression empty, devoid of tears. She nodded once, a sharp, surgical acknowledgement of the finality. Her grief, when it came, was not the debilitating despair of a mother, but the cold, crystalline precision of a general realizing the enemy had just offered the ultimate opportunity. The debt was no longer payable in material wealth or separation. It required utter annihilation. Aria's eyes narrowed. Asterisk Liam, asterisk, he is here, somewhere, saving the child he thinks is dying. Asterisk. She found the information quickly. Liam had checked Emma into a private pediatric wing for observation, a place equipped with high-end suites and lounges ideal for the celebratory recovery Chloe had insisted upon. She walked the polished hospital corridors, leaving a faint trail of chlorine and water. She found the designated suite, Suite D, on the 4th floor. Laughter spilled into the hall, a happy, saccharine sound of careless joy. Aria pushed the heavy oak door open without knocking. The room was bathed in the warm, festive glow of expensive decorations. Balloons bobbed near the ceiling. A custom cake sat on a trolley, and Chloe was laughing brightly, holding a glass of champagne. Emma, the supposed cardiac patient, sat on Liam's lap, looking perfectly healthy, albeit a little dramatically pale, unwrapping a brightly colored gift. The sudden appearance of Aria soaking wet, hair plastered to her head, eyes burning with a terrible consuming fire, snapped the laughter off like a switch. Liam looked up, his initial expression one of irritation mixed with confusion. Aria, what the hell happened? Did the pool break? Why are you? His voice trailed off as he finally registered the totality of her appearance and the absolute 0 degree of fury radiating from her. Aria walked into the room, moving past the astonished faces, not stopping until she was directly in front of him. She reached into the soaking towel she carried and pulled out a small, waterlogged object. The copy of Time's The Secret Garden. Asterisk. It didn't break, Liam. Aria's voice was unnaturally calm, a quiet knife cutting through the festive air. The pool was fine, but the water was cold this morning. Very cold. Liam's chest tightened, a strange primal fear gripping him. He felt Emma shift uncomfortably on his lap. What are you talking about, Aria? Where is Lily? He demanded, his irritation returning as a defense mechanism. Why aren't you helping? Chloe just had a massive scare, and, quiet. Aria's single word was a command that brooked no resistance. She looked down at the child clinging to him. Emma is turning 8 today, isn't she, Chloe? Such a strong little girl. Amazing recovery. Chloe stepped forward, her champagne glass trembling. Aria, you can't disrupt this. Liam, get her out. Aria ignored her, her gaze locked on Liam. You raced here this morning, panicked and blinded, because of a story, a fabrication. You were saving a phantom heart condition, weren't you? Liam stood up, forcing Emma off his knee. Don't you dare minimize Emma's pain. Pain? Aria let out a soundless laugh that was more chilling than any scream. She tilted her head, her wet hair sticking to her jaw. Lily asked you to read a page this morning. 1 page. You told her you couldn't spare 5 minutes. You said it was life or death. She lifted the towel slightly, revealing the small, soaked shirt Lily had been wearing. It was, Liam, Aria whispered, her voice cracking, not with sorrow, but with the pressure of unleashed hatred. It truly was, while you were speeding away to save your mistress's lie. Lily slipped. She drowned in the deep end of your precious infinity pool. Alone. She was pronounced dead 20 minutes ago. Right here, in this hospital. The silence that followed was immense, crushing, filled only by the distant beeping of hospital monitors. Liam's face drained of blood, transforming from defensiveness to stark, agonizing horror. The lavish, perfectly decorated hospital suite blurred, the cake, the balloons, Chloe's frightened face, it all became a grotesque, sickening mockery of reality. No! Liam choked out, stumbling back against the wall, his hands reaching out as if to physically push the words away. No, that's impossible. I would have seen her. I looked, I was right there. You weren't there, Liam. Aria hissed, her eyes finally filling, not with tears of sorrow, but tears of pure, unadulterated vengeance. You were prioritizing the fake drama over the real life you created. You chose her lie over my daughter's last breath. Chloe, seeing Liam begin to crumble, stepped forward, grabbing his arm. Don't listen to her, Liam, she's hysterical. This is some sick trick, because she found out about. Aria's head snapped toward Chloe. Her eyes were no longer the passive, subservient wife's eyes. They held the terrifying, ancient authority of a predator who had just been released from her cage. I have known about your pathetic little fraud for 2 years, Chloe, Aria stated flatly. I simply needed Liam's negligence to become unforgivable. A debt that could only be paid in ruin. Liam stared at her, utterly lost. Aria, please. I didn't know. I swear. I will fix this. I'll give you everything. You have nothing to give me, Liam. Nothing I want. Aria straightened, her stance regal and imposing despite her wet clothing. The quiet housewife was gone. In her place stood a queen draped in the cloak of tragedy. She looked down at the man who had traded his child for a momentary sense of purpose. You always believed I was nothing, Liam. Just a quiet little woman with no family to speak of? Content to manage your property? She delivered the final bomb, a name that carried the weight of the city's entire financial structure. My father's name is Thomas Vance, CEO of the Vance conglomerate. The man who could buy and sell every one of your pitiful little accounts before lunchtime. Chloe's jaw dropped. The Vance conglomerate. The name was synonymous with ruthless, insurmountable wealth. Aria leaned in close to Liam, her voice dropping to a dangerous, intimate register. I am Aria Vance. And I swear to you, Liam, you will not sleep soundly again until every single asset, every piece of stability, every shred of reputation you cling to, is incinerated. You took my daughter, and now I will take absolutely everything you have left. She turned, leaving the opulent, silenced party room. Her soaked footprints marked her path down the hall, mapping the beginning of a cold, inevitable war. 2 months later, the opulent hospital suite, with its lingering scent of birthday cake and chlorine, was just a grotesque memory, sealed away like a biohazard. Aria did not mourn the past. She only analyzed the damage and charted the course for the future. She now occupied an office on the 71st floor of the Vance conglomerate tower. A space of glass, steel, and stark minimalism that offered a terrifyingly clear view of the city, a city that Liam Vance had once thought he commanded. Aria sat behind a custom-made obsidian desk, dressed in a charcoal gray suit tailored with surgical precision. The quiet wife who once obsessed over organic produce and home decor had been replaced by a force of economic nature. Her eyes, formerly softened by patience, were now instruments of cool, strategic assessment, fixed on the financial reports arrayed before her. The liquidity ratio on their Q3 is weaker than we anticipated, Marcus, Aria stated, her voice steady and low, addressing her chief legal operative without lifting her gaze from the spreadsheet. It won't take a hostile takeover. We just need to trigger the covenant breach on the Northern Pacific line. Marcus Thorne, a man whose reputation for financial ruthlessness matched that of Thomas Vance himself, nodded curtly. A simple margin call, Madam Vance. But doing it through 3 separate shells will ensure Liam sees no connection to the conglomerate. He'll think it's just the market tightening. He needs to believe the market has turned against him, not that I am systematically dissolving his life, piece by piece. Aria corrected, her lips forming a thin, cold line. Maintain the pressure. I want his company hemorrhaging cash by the end of the week. He needs to feel the chokehold before he sees the face behind it. The door chimed softly. Liam was here. Aria leaned back, granting the barest nod for Marcus to allow him entry. She composed herself not with effort but with the perfect, icy stillness of absolute certainty. Liam walked in, and the contrast between the man who left Lily for dead and the man standing before her was immediate and stark. He looked haggard, his usually impeccable suit rumpled, his hair unkempt. The 2 months had carved deep lines of anxiety and sleeplessness into his face. He looked like a refugee from his own life. Aria, he began, his voice rough and pleading. Thank you for seeing me. I know I don't deserve this, but I need 5 minutes. Aria did not invite him to sit. She simply watched him, a silent, implacable judge. The banks are calling in the lines of credit. Clients are jumping ship. What is happening to Vance Holdings? Liam swallowed hard, his eyes frantic. I swear, I had no idea about your father, or that you had any connection to times this asterisk. But Aria, you can't do this to me. I made a mistake, a catastrophic mistake, but I am still the father of your child. Aria picked up a pen, twirling it once, deliberately, before setting it down. The simple action was deafening in the silence of the vast office. You times were times the father of my child, Liam, she corrected, her tone devoid of emotion. The moment you chose a lie over Lily's life, that role was terminated. Your mistake was not accidental. It was fundamental. It was rooted in 3 years of prioritizing a fabricated tragedy over the real, vibrant life that depended on you. Liam took a desperate step closer. I regretted every second. I haven't slept since that day. I see her face when I close my eyes. I miss Lily, Aria. I truly do. But destroying me financially won't bring her back. It will only cause more pain. More pain? Aria finally met his gaze, and the sheer hostility in her eyes made him flinch. You think financial discomfort is pain, Liam? Pain is holding your dead daughter's soaked body, and knowing that the man who swore to protect her was celebrating a fraud down the hall. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, though the words were amplified by the polished surfaces of the room. The financial ruin is merely an administrative inconvenience, Liam. It's the procedure required to strip you of the resources you squandered. It is not, however, your true punishment. Liam stared at her, confused. Then what is it? What do you want from me? Aria smiled, a cold, empty gesture that sent a shiver down his spine. Your true punishment is the guilt you carry. It's the knowledge that you sacrificed your child for a lie, and the inescapable realization that you are wholly responsible for the emptiness in this world. I don't need to inflict pain on your soul. You are already doing a far better job of that yourself. She motioned to the door. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with the board of directors regarding the accelerated acquisition of your company's prime assets. You will be served with the initial papers tomorrow. Liam stood paralyzed, watching the woman who had been his submissive wife issue his death warrant with the same calm efficiency she once used to manage the household staff. She was no longer Aria. She was a predator, beautifully dressed, completely unleashed. Chloe, she's terrified, Aria. She's trying to sell her apartment. She knows you're coming for her too, Liam pleaded, trying a last-ditch effort to appeal to some vestige of mercy. Chloe will wait her turn, Aria said, dismissing the mistress as a minor detail, but she will learn that the medical records of a dying child are easily forged, but the financial records of the Vance conglomerate are not. Liam knew there was no appeal, no negotiation. He was dealing with Thomas Vance's daughter, a woman who treated corporate dismantling like cleaning house. He backed away slowly, defeated. As he reached the heavy oak door, Aria spoke one last time, her voice echoing the terrifying finality of a closing tomb. You had your 5 minutes, Liam. Next time, choose wisely. Liam stumbled out, leaving the office to the cold, sterile efficiency of Aria and her loyal team. The door clicked shut, silencing the desperation. Aria rose and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. She looked down, seeing the cityscape stretching out below. For a brief moment, the armor cracked. She pressed a hand against the cool glass, not feeling the exhilaration of power, but the raw, hollow ache of loss. She remembered the feel of Lily's tiny hand clutching Time's The Secret Garden asterisk. The cost must be total, Lily, she whispered to the reflection staring back at her. I won't stop until there is nothing left for him to choose. Marcus approached cautiously, seeing the flicker of the mother beneath the executive. Madam Vance, the initial reports are ready for the press. We have successfully obscured your involvement, linking the collapse entirely to poor managerial decisions made over the last 2 years. Aria turned back, the executive mask firmly in place. Good. We are not interested in public acclaim, Marcus. We are interested in absolute solitude. I want him to know what it is like to be left alone, with nothing but the silence of the water in his ears. The market turned against Liam Vance, with the quiet brutality of a carefully timed execution. 2 days after his agonizing interview with Aria, the financial news hit the wires. Dressed up in sanitized corporate language, Vance Holdings was undergoing a mandatory, immediate strategic restructuring, followed by the expedited sale of its core assets to multiple anonymous holding entities. The narrative, meticulously crafted by Marcus Thorne and signed off by Aria, suggested massive debt mismanagement and poor Q3 performance, painting Liam as a reckless, incompetent failure. The reality was that Aria, leveraging the deep pockets and influence of the Vance conglomerate, had simply triggered a series of interlocking covenant breaches that were impossible to cure. There was no defense, no negotiation, only the cold, hard mechanics of a forced dissolution. Liam sat in his drastically smaller, temporary downtown office, staring at the front page of the Times Financial Review asterisk. The headline screamed about the spectacular fall of his firm, attributing the disaster to his inattention to core market demands. Inattention. The irony was a bitter ash in his mouth. His inattention had been fatal long before the balance sheets turned red. His phone rang incessantly, but none of the calls were supportive. They were reporters seeking a quote, creditors demanding immediate collateral, or former colleagues simply calling to gloat. He tried desperately to salvage some dignity, agreeing to meet an old associate, David, for an emergency lunch at the Metropolitan Club, a place Liam had once considered his second home. He arrived promptly, trying to project the calm resilience of a man facing a temporary setback. But the moment he walked in, he felt the chill. The room was buzzing with the usual power players, but the conversations stopped, replaced by quick, assessing glances. David approached him, not with sympathy, but with thinly veiled contempt. Liam, I'm sorry about the lunch. Something vital came up, David said, his voice flat. He didn't offer a handshake, merely gesturing toward the dining room. But I saw the headlines. Brutal. Honestly, Liam, where was your oversight? You let the Northern Pacific Line get away from you? Elementary mistakes. It wasn't mistakes, David. It was orchestrated. Something far bigger is at play. Oh, spare me the conspiracy theories, David interrupted, glancing pointedly at his watch. Look, I liked you, but this is the truth. You lost focus, we all saw it. 3 years you've been running around playing house with that little distraction and her dying daughter. You stopped showing up. You stopped performing. This is the market reaction to negligence. Plain and simple. David leaned in, lowering his voice just enough to sound confidential, but loud enough for the waiter passing by to catch the edge of the scorn. I just want to confirm, you're not looking to liquidate your personal stock portfolio anytime soon, are you? Because if you are, I have some associates who are offering cents on the dollar. Purely as a favor, of course. To clear up your messes. The insult was a physical blow. Liam's shoulders slumped. He had lost not just his company, but his entire standing. The men who had once sought his advice now viewed him as a public pariah. A cautionary tale of a man who let his personal weakness ruin his professional life. No, thank you, David. Liam managed, his voice hollow. He didn't wait for David to walk away. He simply turned and left the club, feeling the collective gaze of his former peers burning into his back. The scorn was worse than the financial loss. Aria hadn't just broken his bank account. She had destroyed the very identity he had spent 20 years building. When Liam returned to the temporary apartment he and Chloe were now renting, the atmosphere was a volatile mixture of fear and rage. Chloe was pacing their cramped living room, furiously dialing numbers that went unanswered. Where were you? Did you talk to David? Did he help? Chloe demanded, rushing at him the moment the door closed. Her flawless makeup was smudged, and her usual theatrical composure had fractured. He offered to buy my personal stocks at a predatory discount, Liam said, dropping his briefcase heavily onto the floor. The narrative is set, Chloe. They all think I'm a negligent idiot who let his affair distract him from his duties. Negligent idiot? You times are asterisk! Chloe shrieked, running her hands through her hair. How could you let this happen, Liam? This isn't just business. My accounts are tied up in the settlement. I told you to fight. Use your name. Use Thomas Vance's name against Aria. Liam turned away, walking toward the window, which overlooked a gray, uninspiring alley. It's too late, Chloe. She is Thomas Vance's name. This isn't about a settlement anymore. This is a complete purge. She is dismantling Vance Holdings, piece by piece, and she's enjoying every second of it. Enjoying it? Liam, we are going to be broke. Emma needs her therapy. She needs her specialists. We need the money. Chloe's voice cracked. For the first time, Liam noticed that her fear wasn't about Emma's health, but about the cost times of Emma's health and her own lifestyle. Emma is fine, Chloe, Liam muttered, the truth of his words slicing through his despair. She's playing with her new toys, perfectly healthy. The problem is, you've convinced everyone, including me, for 3 years, that she was one crisis away from dying. And I bought it. I bought the lie. And I paid for it with Lily's life. Chloe froze, her face hardening. Don't you dare bring Lily into this. That was an accident. I was trying to save Emma. You were supposed to be watching your own brat. Don't shift the blame. I am not shifting the blame, Liam said, turning back, his eyes dark with self-loathing. I am owning it. Every single agonizing moment of it. I don't care about the money, Chloe. I only care that my child drowned while I was rushing to save a phantom. Chloe stepped back, recognizing the depth of his brokenness. He wasn't focused on survival. He was focused on atonement. You have to do something, she insisted, her voice dropping to a desperate plea. You have to appeal to Aria. She can't take everything. She's acting like a monster. Liam shook his head slowly. Aria is a mother whose child was stolen by my selfishness. Monsters are made, Chloe. I created this one. Later that evening, after Chloe had tearfully retreated to bed, muttering about legal aid, Liam sat alone in the dim apartment. The only sound was the distant city traffic. A delivery service had dropped off a small, heavy wooden box earlier, addressed personally to him. He hadn't opened it, dismissing it as another legal document. He retrieved the box now, cutting the thick twine with a pocket knife. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a single object, a miniature wooden coffin, expertly carved and polished. It was tiny, small enough to fit in the palm of his hand, clearly a bespoke artisan piece. He lifted it out, his fingers trembling. The wood was cold. Engraved delicately onto the brass nameplate was a single word, *Lily*. A wave of nausea crashed over him, stealing his breath. This was not the work of a distant corporate entity. This was the work of a meticulous, vengeful mind. A mind that wanted to ensure the distinction between financial ruin and the true, devastating debt of blood was never blurred. Aria wanted him to hold the physical manifestation of his guilt, the tangible symbol of what he had exchanged for Chloe's lie. He knew, with absolute certainty, that Aria had waited until the precise moment his business empire was definitively crushed to send the gift. The financial shockwave was over. Now, the psychological torment had begun. Liam clutched the tiny coffin until the edges dug painfully into his palm. He lifted it to his lips, closing his eyes, letting out a silent, ragged sound that was neither a sob nor a scream. It was the sound of a man beginning to break under the weight of an unpayable debt. Meanwhile, 71 floors above the city, Aria was meeting with Marcus Thorne, reviewing the final figures for the liquidation of Vance Holdings. "Every asset secured, Madam Vance. The company is finished," Marcus confirmed, closing his ledger. Aria looked out at the glittering night sky. She thought not of the billions she had reclaimed, but of the small, silent hand she had seen just beneath the water's surface. "And the package?" she asked, her voice flat. "Delivered 30 minutes ago. Personally addressed." Aria nodded once. The financial damage was measured in dollars and reputation. The emotional damage was measured in the cold weight of that small wooden box. "Good," she replied, closing her own brief. "Now we focus on the true liability. I want to know everything there is to know about Dr. Chen, the physician who signed Emma's initial myocardial report. Chloe and her fabricated heart condition were next on the list. Aria's revenge was methodical. She would strip Liam of everything, but she would ensure Chloe faced the full weight of the criminal justice system for the lie that had precipitated Lily's death. The hunt was just entering its second, far more dangerous phase. The investigation into Dr. Chen revealed a network of shell companies and offshore accounts used to funnel large sums of money, all traceable back to a complex financial structure orchestrated by Chloe 2 years prior. The objective was chillingly clear. Not to save a child, but to purchase an elaborate professional lie. Aria sat with Marcus Thorne, reviewing the final authenticated medical reports. The real reports, obtained through a warrant executed in the early hours of the morning, confirmed that Emma had suffered from a mild, self-resolving arrhythmia, a common, minor condition, and nothing close to the severe myocardial defect that had required Liam's frantic, round-the-clock devotion. "The lie was airtight, Madam Vance," Marcus confirmed, tapping a finger on the stack of documents. Chloe had her own physician and legal team ready to fight any challenge, knowing Liam would accept the diagnosis without question, provided it amplified his savior complex. "The perfect weapon," Aria murmured, her eyes cold. "An innocent victim that only Liam could save." She stood, adjusting the cuff of her silk blouse. Vance Holdings was a memory. The next stage required maximum visibility. "Prepare the presentation, Marcus. I want the contrast between the forged documents and the real reports displayed publicly. Tonight, at the Vance Foundation Gala, I want every investor, every society editor, and every one of Liam's former colleagues present." The Vance Foundation Gala was the social event of the season, a glittering monument to the family's insurmountable power and influence. Liam, against all advice, had insisted on attending. He needed to be seen, to desperately lobby any remaining friend for a lifeline, a bridge loan, a temporary respite from the financial guillotine that Aria had dropped on his life. He arrived with Chloe clinging to his arm, both of them encased in the expensive, yet now slightly ill-fitting, armor of formality. Chloe managed a strained, bright smile, but Liam was a ghost moving through the room. Every handshake felt like an interrogation. Every whispered conversation seemed to be about his spectacular fall. Chloe nudged him sharply. "Stop pacing, Liam, smile. They'll sense the weakness. We need to look resilient. The financial mess is temporary." "Temporary?" Liam muttered, swallowing the bile that rose in his throat. "We live in a serviced apartment and I had to sell my watch collection just to pay the catering bill for this event, Chloe. Nothing about this is temporary." His gaze snagged on Aria. She entered the ballroom like royalty. Her gown was a deep emerald green, a color that made her look both untouchable and dangerous. She was flanked by security and Marcus Thorne. She did not seek attention. It simply gravitated to her, drawn by the raw, focused power she now exuded. She was the epicenter of the room. Aria walked deliberately, weaving through the clusters of influential guests, until she stood precisely 10 feet from Liam and Chloe. The crowd around them, sensing the collision of fates, fell into a hush. "Liam," Aria greeted him, her voice perfectly modulated, calm and deadly. She did not spare Chloe a glance. Liam felt his knees weaken. He looked into her eyes and saw only the fathomless cold water of his pool. "Aria, I see you've settled into the family business." "Yes," Aria replied, a faint, chilling smile touching her lips. "And I find that the one thing my father taught me best is the value of meticulous accounting. Every debt must be paid, Liam. Every single one." Chloe stepped forward, her theatrical instincts kicking in. "Aria, this is ridiculous. We are at a charity event. You've taken everything Vance Holdings is dust. Isn't that enough? You're acting like a crazed woman." Aria finally looked at Chloe, and the brief, dismissive glance felt like a physical slap. "The financial transaction was simply the interest on the debt, Chloe," Aria explained, her voice carrying easily across the sudden, tense silence. "The principal payment involves exposing the fundamental lie that allowed Liam to abandon his daughter." Liam felt a fresh wave of panic. "Aria, please. We don't need to do this here." "Oh, but we do, Liam. Everyone here believed you were a man of honor, albeit a flawed one, driven to desperation by the tragic illness of a beloved child. They must understand the truth of your motivations." Aria nodded slightly to Marcus Thorne. Marcus tapped a control on a discreet device. The enormous projector screen that had been displaying the Vance Foundation logo suddenly flared to life, illuminating the entire wall behind the stage. The screen displayed a side-by-side comparison. On the left, a document with a bold header. *** forged. Emma Shao. Severe myocardial defect. Immediate intervention required. ***. Beneath it, the forged signature of Dr. Chen. On the right, the authenticated document dated the same day. ***. Authentic. Emma Vance, mild sinus arrhythmia. Observation only. Cold conviction. 3 years ago, Chloe Xiao orchestrated a scheme. She utilized a paid physician to fabricate a life-threatening heart condition for her daughter Emma. The purpose was singular: to exploit Liam's misplaced need for heroism and steal his attention, resources, and loyalty. The ballroom erupted in a collective gasp. People turned their furious, shocked faces toward Chloe. Chloe's carefully constructed facade shattered. "Lies! That's all a lie! You forged those documents. Emma is sick, Liam. Tell them how we rushed her to the hospital." Liam stared at the screen, then at the authentic report, and then back at Chloe. The cold dread that had been his constant companion solidified into a terrible, agonizing certainty. Lily's face, pale and sinking beneath the water, flashed in his mind. He had sacrificed the truth of his own daughter's needs for this. A piece of paper. A lie. "She's not sick?" Liam whispered, the blood draining from his face, leaving him chalk white. His voice was a raw, choked sound of complete devastation. The last 3 years, all the trips, the specialized care. The morning I left Lily alone at the pool. Aria's eyes were pitiless. You left your daughter to drown, Liam. To save a girl who was home, perfectly healthy, unwrapping gifts paid for by the father she had been successfully coached to manipulate. Liam let out a soundless roar of pain, stumbling back a step. The guilt he had carried was unbearable. The realization that the sacrifice was made for a non-existent cause was soul-crushing. He saw himself, frantic and blind, speeding away from the pool, convinced he was a hero, when in reality he was just a fool led by a woman who preyed on his weakness. Chloe, realizing the absolute finality of her exposure, made a desperate attempt to flee. She pushed Liam aside, scrambling toward the nearest exit, her expensive gown brushing against the tables, but Aria was prepared. As Chloe reached the doors, two of Aria's security detail moved with practiced speed, blocking her exit and taking firm hold of her arms. "Let me go, Liam, help me!" Chloe shrieked, her voice dissolving into pure hysteria, a sound far more genuine than her performance years ago. Aria addressed the room, her voice clear and commanding. "Chloe Xiao will not be leaving this evening. Her fraudulent actions led directly to the death of a minor child, Lily Vance, by forcing her father to abandon his duties under false pretenses. The Vance conglomerate has provided all evidence to the city attorney's office, along with documentation regarding Dr. Chen's complicity." She then looked directly at Liam, who was standing immobile, swaying slightly, completely broken. The destruction of his company had been the first wound. The revelation that his sacrifice was a farce was the death blow. "You chose her lie, Liam," Aria repeated, ensuring the words penetrated the protective shell of his shock. "You chose an imaginary death over a real life. Now you must live with the cost of that unforgivable choice." Liam sank to his knees, heedless of the cameras flashing and the judgmental eyes of the city's elite. The reality of his failure, his total, humiliating, and irreversible failure crashed over him. He had nothing left. His reputation was gone, his wealth annihilated, and the foundational justification for his betrayal was revealed to be a cruel joke. He had murdered his own daughter with his negligence, all for a lie. Aria watched him, her expression unchanging. She felt no triumph, only the cold, empty satisfaction of a checklist completed. She turned and walked away from the chaos, leaving the sound of Chloe's desperate wails and Liam's silent, agonizing capitulation echoing in the hall. The financial war was over. The moral destruction was complete. The silence after the gala was colder, harder, and far more suffocating than the public outcry. Liam had been driven away from the scene not by a security detail, but by his own mother's frantic, shame-ridden chauffeur. The last vestiges of his life, a few remaining personal investment accounts, and the expensive temporary apartment vanished in a flurry of injunctions and liens the next morning. Aria was relentless. She didn't want the money. She wanted the stripping bare of every single comfort, every illusion of stability. Liam and Chloe found themselves temporarily housed in a shabby, anonymous motel room on the furthest edge of the city, a place where the noise of the highway drowned out the persistent, buzzing anxiety. Chloe was unrecognizable. The woman who had maintained a polished, tragic composure for 3 years was now a volatile mess of denial and panic. She screamed at Liam, accusing him of weakness, of failing to protect her, even as the criminal charges stemming from the medical fraud began to mount against her. "You have to call your mother, you have to talk to Aria. She can't just seize times everything asterisk." Chloe paced the narrow room, her high heels clicking frantically on the worn carpet. "Emma needs me. They're saying they might put her in temporary care, Liam, because of those forged papers. It's all Aria's fault." Liam sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper. He barely heard her. His reality had been reduced to 2 haunting images: Lily's sinking hand, and the side-by-side comparison of the medical documents on the massive gala screen. He was a fool, a monster disguised as a savior. "It wasn't Aria's fault, Chloe," Liam said, his voice flat and weary. "The documents were true. You lied. You took my child's life with a lie. I am grateful you are facing consequences. Chloe stopped, her face contorted with rage. Grateful? You worthless, broken man. You're nothing without the money. I did what I had to do to survive, and you let that witch take everything including your daughter, because you were too busy playing the pathetic noble husband. The insults rolled off him. He was already so low that her cruelty had no purchase. He had reached a point of profound self-loathing where he agreed with every word she said. Seeing that her rage had no effect, Chloe abruptly switched tactics. Her eyes narrowed into cold slits. You know what this means, don't you, Liam? She whispered, sinking onto the bed beside him, her hand reaching for his arm, a calculated gesture of false intimacy. We're finished. Completely. You chose her Aria's cold revenge over saving us. I can't live like this. Emma won't have a future, and I certainly won't survive prison. She stood up quickly, rushing toward the small, worn leather purse she'd salvaged. Liam watched, detached, as she rummaged inside, pulling out a small, amber-colored bottle of prescription sleeping pills, the same type she had theatrically claimed to need for anxiety attacks many times before. I won't let Aria win this way. Chloe choked out, her voice trembling dramatically. I won't be reduced to nothing. Tell Emma I loved her. Liam didn't move. He watched the carefully rehearsed performance unfold. He had seen this act too many times over the years, the sudden, dramatic collapse, the threats of self-harm, the need for immediate, comforting attention. Only this time, the stakes were real, and her drama felt like a cheap imitation of the tragedy she had inflicted. Chloe poured out a handful of pills, holding them up for Liam to see, ensuring he witnessed the final, desperate plea for attention. Chloe, don't, Liam said without urgency, his heart heavy but untouched by panic. She hesitated, waiting for him to rush forward, to plead, to declare his renewed love and commitment. When he simply stared back, a flicker of genuine terror crossed her face. This wasn't working. With a gasping sound, she thrust the pills into her mouth, washing them down with a swig of lukewarm water. Then, she did the one thing that confirmed the act was entirely for show. She reached for the motel phone and dialed 911, announcing in a high, theatrical sob that she had just overdosed. Liam listened to the frantic exchange with the dispatcher. He hadn't stopped her. He hadn't even reached out. He simply watched the pathetic conclusion of her reign of deceit. When the paramedics arrived, they found Liam sitting calmly beside the sobbing Chloe, who was already beginning to regret the minimal dosage she had taken. Realizing the stunt had failed to elicit the desired response from her husband. Are you her next of kin? A paramedic asked Liam, looking confused by his detached demeanor. I am her former partner, Liam corrected softly, rising slowly. She is a good actress. I recommend a stomach pump and a mandatory psychological evaluation. He followed the ambulance to a different hospital, one less glamorous than St. Jude's, but he stayed only long enough to confirm that the drugs, taken in a minimal quantity, posed no threat to her life. He knew this was her last pathetic attempt to anchor herself to his life, using fear as currency. Liam sat in the hard plastic chair outside Chloe's room late that afternoon, exhausted, when Aria arrived. She was dressed in a tailored pale gray skirt suit, holding a sleek black file. She looked exactly as she had at the gala, composed, flawless and chillingly devoid of emotion. She walked past Liam without acknowledging his presence. The act of avoidance, a powerful rejection. Liam stood up, his gaze following her into the room. Chloe, recovering in the sterile white bed, looked up as the door opened, her eyes red and puffy, still clinging to the narrative of fragility. Liam, you came back, she whispered, but the sentence died in her throat as she saw Aria standing over her. Aria? What do you want? Haven't you taken enough? Aria did not approach the bed. She stood by the footrail, Marcus Thorne positioned silently behind her. I am not here for you, Chloe, Aria stated, opening the black file. I am here for Emma. Chloe tried to sit up, her staging suddenly forgotten. Emma? What about Emma? You said you wouldn't hurt Emma. Emma is entirely innocent. Aria confirmed, her voice cold. She is also a child whose mother has just publicly committed fraud, attempted a manipulative suicide to evade criminal charges, and has a proven track record of using her daughter's fictional illness for personal gain. Aria snapped the file shut. The city attorney has been presented with evidence of your medical fraud, the misappropriation of funds intended for Emma's false treatments, and tonight's obvious performance. I am using my resources to ensure that the judge agrees with our assessment. You are a danger to Emma's physical and psychological well-being. Chloe's eyes widened with genuine, unadulterated terror. No, you can't. I'm her mother. I love her. Your love is calculated, Chloe. It is contingent upon her usefulness. Aria countered mercilessly. Emma will be taken into temporary protective custody. I have arranged for her to stay with a neutral third party, a trusted employee of the Vance Foundation who specializes in child welfare cases, until the court decides whether you are fit to retain custody, which, given the evidence, is highly unlikely. Chloe launched herself forward, scrambling out of the bed, trailing wires and IV lines. You monster! You are taking my child just to hurt me. Aria remained impassive. No. I am taking your child to save her from the continued fallout of your lies. You stole my daughter's future, Chloe. I am ensuring you lose yours. The debt is comprehensive. You will face fraud charges, and you will lose Emma. Everything you valued most is now gone. A nurse rushed in, alerted by the monitor and Chloe's shrieks. Security guards moved to prevent Chloe from reaching Aria. Aria looked down at the hysterical woman, utterly defeated and exposed. Enjoy your solitude, Chloe. It is the price of dishonesty. She turned and left the room, leaving Chloe struggling against the medical staff, her wails of desperation echoing down the empty hall. Liam stood there, absorbing the scene. He had watched the woman he had loved, the woman for whom he had committed the ultimate betrayal, collapse into pure, self-centered desperation. He saw no love for Emma in her panic, only the primal fear of losing her final bargaining chip. Aria paused when she reached him, though she did not look at him directly. I have no interest in Chloe's life, Liam. But I will not allow her to walk away from the crime that killed Lily. The legal proceedings will be drawn out. The public spectacle will follow her for years. And Emma? Liam asked, his voice raw. Emma will be taken care of, Aria confirmed, finally meeting his gaze, her expression neutral. She will be given stability, therapy, and most importantly, truth. Liam nodded, feeling a cold, definitive clarity settle over him. He watched Aria walk away, her back straight, her mission continuing without compromise. He realized that Aria's revenge was not driven by blind hatred, but by a profound need for justice. Justice that required the absolute, systemic destruction of the lie that had taken Lily. He looked back toward Chloe's room, hearing her muffled sobs of failure. He felt nothing for her, no pity, no desire, no loyalty. The final thread connecting him to his catastrophe had been severed. Chloe was merely a footnote in his greater crime. He turned and walked toward the exit, his focus shifting. Aria had stripped him of everything physical. Now, only his soul remained, heavy with guilt. Aria said his true punishment was the guilt he carried. He agreed. He knew then, with a chilling certainty, that the only thing he had left to offer his dead daughter was the ultimate, solitary act of atonement. He did not return to the squalid motel room immediately. Instead, Liam found himself wandering the cold, anonymous streets, the memory of Chloe's theatrical breakdown and Aria's surgical coldness warring with the deep, aching certainty that both women were right. He was fundamentally, irrevocably guilty. His feet eventually carried him to a small, secure storage unit he had rented 2 months prior, a clandestine space he had used to hide a few sentimental items salvaged from the mansion before Aria's financial armies closed in. He fumbled with the keys in the dim, dusty light of the corridor, the metallic scent of neglect filling his nostrils. Inside, among boxes of discarded financial ledgers and forgotten golf trophies, sat a small, brightly colored cardboard box. Lily's memory box. Liam pulled it out, setting it gently on the concrete floor. He opened it, revealing the haphazard treasures of a 6-year-old. A broken plastic wand, a handful of smooth river stones, a small, crudely drawn picture of a rainbow-colored horse, and tucked beneath it all, a photograph. It was a candid shot from last summer. Lily was sitting poolside, her face smeared with sunscreen, beaming at the camera. Her arms wrapped around the neck of the inflatable unicorn. Life, vibrant and laughing, caught forever in the sunlight. Liam picked up the photo, his large hands shaking so violently that the glossy paper rippled. He lowered himself onto the cold floor, leaning his head against the rough concrete wall. He looked at the picture, searching for any hint of the pain he should have noticed. The silence he should have heard. All he saw was pure, innocent belief in a world that included him. "Lily?" he whispered, the name a painful, raspy sound that fractured the silence of the storage unit. "My sweet girl." He pressed the photograph against his forehead, closing his eyes against the image. But the image only intensified behind his eyelids. He remembered the sound of his car tires screeching away, driven by the manufactured hysteria of Chloe's voice. He remembered the brief, fleeting ripple of water he had dismissed. He remembered being the Times hero asterisk, rushing to the hospital to save a life that was never in danger. And Lily had been alone. "I failed you," he confessed, the words tasting like ash. He didn't speak to the memory of Aria, or Chloe, or the ghost of his reputation. He spoke directly to the little girl in the photo, the only person whose judgment mattered. "You asked for 5 minutes, and I told you no. I told you that Emma's imaginary heart was ticking down, and I ignored the reality of yours. I let Chloe's lie define my purpose, because the chaos made me feel important. It made me feel like a savior." A profound, nauseating wave of self-hatred washed over him, far deeper than the fear of financial ruin. "I left you to the cold water. I drove away, thinking I was a good man, doing a necessary thing. But I wasn't a good man, Lily. I was a man desperate to escape the quiet, mundane reality of being a father to Times U asterisk. I chose the drama. I chose the pretense, and you paid for it." He buried his face in his hands, finally allowing the tears he had suppressed for 2 months to break free. They were not tears of sorrow for his loss, but tears of absolute, brutal guilt for his actions. The sobs racked his body, loud and ugly. The sound of a man confronting the full scope of his monstrous betrayal. Aria's revenge, the dissolution of his company, the destruction of his reputation, the exposure of Chloe's fraud was all just process. It was the debt collector tallying the accounts. But the true, inescapable penalty was internal. He lifted his head, his gaze sweeping over the relics of his former life. The trophies, the designer suits, the symbol of the success he had valued more than his daughter. They were all meaningless debris. Aria had stated his punishment was the guilt he carried. But how long was he expected to carry it? A lifetime? 100 lifetimes would not be enough to balance the ledger. Liam realized, with cold, terrifying clarity, that there was only one commodity left in his possession that held any value: the vessel of his failure. His own life. If Aria had demanded every dollar, every piece of real estate, and every ounce of respect he owned, then the final, ultimate transaction required the complete surrender of the self. This wasn't an act of cowardice or escape, it was the final, inescapable payment for the life he had stolen. I am the price. He stood up, the solitary decree settling into his soul. His mind, usually fraught with panic and anxiety, was suddenly calm, focused. He felt a terrifying, singular resolve. His death would accomplish 3 things. It would complete the required atonement to Lily. It would finalize the destruction of Liam Vance, the negligent father and broken husband, ensuring nothing remained for Aria to pursue. And perhaps, paradoxically, it would grant Aria the absolute finality she craved, the proof that the debt had been paid in full, and the war was over. He smoothed the crumpled photograph of Lily, tucking it carefully into his wallet, right over his heart. He gathered the empty box, ready to leave the storage unit for the last time. As he walked toward the metal door, he paused, looking back at the dark, silent space. He realized that the only genuine peace he had felt in months was this terrifying, solitary decision. He wasn't running from guilt. He was running toward the only form of justice left. He knew what he had to do. He would ensure his death was not only final, but also served as the execution of justice for the woman who had created the lie. Liam locked the storage unit, leaving the trophies of his failed ambition behind. He walked out into the harsh city light, a man without a future, prepared to write the violent final chapter of his atonement. The news of Liam Vance's utter financial and moral collapse traveled through the city's upper echelon, faster than any market report. But it hit his mother, Eleanor Vance, with the concussive force of personal disgrace. Eleanor, a woman who measured her self-worth by the unflinching strength of her social standing, viewed the entire saga, the affair, the drowning, the financial destruction as a vulgar stain on the family legacy. Now, with Liam retreating into a dangerous, suicidal silence, she was forced to confront the architect of the ruin. She bypassed the usual protocol, demanding an immediate audience with Aria Vance at the conglomerate tower. Eleanor entered the 71st floor office, like a battleship sailing into hostile waters, perfectly coiffed, clad in severe couture, and radiating a desperate, contained fury. Aria, who was signing off on the final, forced sale of Liam's personal yacht, did not look up immediately. "Madam Vance?" Aria greeted her, the term detached and formal, refusing to grant Eleanor the familial title of mother. "To what do I owe the displeasure?" Eleanor's facade momentarily cracked. Her chin trembled, not with sorrow for Lily, but with fear for the consequences that Aria had unleashed. "Aria, this has to stop," Eleanor pleaded, her voice dropping to a harsh, controlled whisper. "The company is gone. His reputation is ruined beyond repair. Chloe is facing criminal charges. The point has been made. But Liam, he is broken. He is my son, Aria. If you push him any further, I fear for his life." Aria finally set the pen down, the click echoing sharply in the vast room. She leaned back, regarding Eleanor with an expression that combined pity and profound contempt. "Fear for his life, Eleanor?" Aria repeated, her tone clinically precise. Where was this fear 2 months ago, when he was speeding away from the house to rescue a fabricated tragedy? Where was this maternal panic when Lily was begging him to read 1 page of a book? Eleanor flinched. "That is cruel, Aria. You know Liam is grieving. He has paid the price for his carelessness. But a man's life? Surely you can't demand his life as payment? What would Thomas say about such extreme medieval vengeance?" "My father understands that the currency of betrayal changes once a child is involved," Aria retorted. "As for paying the price, Liam has paid only the interest, Eleanor. The interest was financial. The principal is guilt. I have simply ensured he has no material wealth left to distract him from his failure." Eleanor sank onto the chair opposite the desk, her carefully constructed composure dissolving. "Aria, please, we need a resolution. A signed agreement. You have enough money. Let him keep a small apartment, a nominal position somewhere distant. We can settle the debt now. We can protect the family name." "Protect the family name?" Aria gave a chilling, mirthless laugh. "Do you mean the name that was so easily tarnished by his infidelity and his grotesque negligence? Or do you mean the name that you yourselves protected, Eleanor, by ensuring Lily remained largely invisible?" Aria fixed her gaze on the elder woman. "Don't pretend you were a devoted grandmother. You loved the narrative of the sick, fragile Emma. It was dramatic. It elicited pity from your social circle. Lily, the healthy, quiet child who asked for affection, she was too mundane, too much of an inconvenience to your son's new life. You tolerated her neglect because it made your life easier. The accusation was too precise, too cutting." Eleanor had no defense. She had, in fact, always shown more concern for Emma's reported health crises, sending expensive gifts and specialized toys, while Lily received a polite, distant check on her birthdays. I didn't know it was a lie," Eleanor stammered. "No, You didn't, Aria agreed, without heat. But you accepted the premise of a desperate sick child requiring all of Liam's time, which excused his constant absence from our times home. You helped him institutionalize his neglect. Aria rose and walked around the desk, standing tall and imposing. Now Liam is broken because he realized he sacrificed his flesh and blood for a cheap lie, and you come here. Not to mourn Lily, but to protect your son from the consequences of his profound moral failure. She placed both hands on the edge of the desk, leaning toward Eleanor. I am Aria Vance, Eleanor. Not the timid wife who tolerated your judgment. The price for Lily's life is total, and it is non-negotiable. I will not stop until Liam is fully accountable, not just for the money, but for the soul he forfeited. And the only way for the debt to be fully paid is for him to face the silence he created. Eleanor looked up at Aria's face, searching for a hint of mercy, a flicker of the woman she used to know. There was nothing. Aria was a glacier of absolute certainty. He is talking about the quiet peace of the grave, Aria, Eleanor whispered, finally abandoning the pretense of propriety for raw fear. He is planning something desperate. You have to give him a way out, or you will have blood on your hands too. No, Eleanor, Aria countered instantly, her voice utterly cold. He will have blood on his hands. The only thing I am guilty of is ensuring he cannot escape the consequences of his choice. If Liam chooses to run from his guilt through an act of cowardice, that is his final sin, not mine. Aria nodded toward the door, a gesture of absolute dismissal. You have your answer. The war is over only when the debt is paid in full. There will be no settlement, no mercy, and no peace for Liam until then. Defeated and humiliated, Eleanor rose, stumbling slightly. She looked back at the cold, powerful figure of Aria, realizing that the quiet, compliant daughter-in-law she had despised had transformed into a ruthless force of nature, perfectly executing the vengeance that her son, in his blindness, had fatally invited. Eleanor left the office, her footsteps echoing down the pristine hallway, carrying with her the terrifying confirmation. Aria's heart was irrevocably closed. She was not seeking reconciliation. She was demanding annihilation. Aria watched her go. She returned to her desk, picking up the pen, signing the final document that officially transferred ownership of Liam's yacht. She felt no satisfaction, only a deep, abiding emptiness. She had destroyed the life that destroyed her daughter, but even total ruin could not fill the void. She focused on the next step, the final confrontation, the last conversation she would ever grant Liam, just to ensure he understood the totality of his crime before he disappeared entirely. She needed him to know she saw his suffering, but that she considered it earned. The phone call she needed to make was simple. Arrange the meeting. The countdown to the ultimate reckoning was entering its final, irreversible phase. The meeting was set for a private gallery space in Midtown, chosen by Aria for its stark, unforgiving minimalism and the guarantee of total discretion. Aria arrived first, her suit black, sharp, and entirely reflective of her mood. She stood before a vast, abstract canvas, waiting, not with impatience, but with the cool certainty of an executioner awaiting the condemned. Liam entered moments later. He looked less haggard than he had 2 months prior, but the change was alarming. He was neat, dressed in a simple dark sweater, and his eyes held a terrifying calmness, the kind that follows the complete cessation of struggle. He no longer projected desperation, he projected finality. He didn't plead. He didn't ask for clemency or financial aid. He simply walked toward her, stopping a respectful distance away, and bowed his head slightly. Thank you for granting this, Aria, he said, his voice low and steady. I didn't request this meeting to beg for my life, or for my remaining accounts. They are yours, and you are right to take them. Aria looked at him, searching for the frantic greed she had become accustomed to, but found only hollow acceptance. This new demeanor unnerved her far more than his previous pleading. Then why are you here, Liam? Aria asked, her voice flat, reflecting the cold marble floor beneath their feet. Liam lifted his gaze, and for the first time since that day at the hospital, Aria saw something genuine in his eyes. Pure, unadulterated remorse. "I am here to confess to the one person who truly understands the crime," he said quietly. "I watched your confrontation with Chloe. I saw the documents. You are right. I murdered Lily with my negligence, and I did it for a lie. Chloe merely provided the excuse. But the choice to speed away from the pool, to prioritize my own false heroism over my child's life that was mine alone." He closed his eyes briefly, inhaling a shuddering breath. "There is no material comfort left for me. You have ensured that. Every door is closed. Every former friend has turned away. And the knowledge of what I did is absolute. I wanted you to know that your vengeance is successful, Aria. I am completely, utterly destroyed." Aria watched him, her hand gripping the edge of the display pedestal. His confession was meticulous, echoing the exact phrasing she had used against him. It was an acknowledgement of her justice, a terrifying form of surrender. "You believe that is enough?" Aria challenged, her voice raising slightly, trying to goad him, to pull him back to the familiar ground of argument. "Do you think feeling guilt compensates for the emptiness in my home? Do you think your emotional breakdown balances the ledger?" Liam smiled, a brief sad expression. "No, I know it doesn't. Guilt is the daily torment, but it is not the payment. I understand the debt is blood, Aria, not money." "Then what do you propose, Liam?" Aria demanded, stepping closer, needing to force the final devastating truth from him. She needed to understand his terrifying peace. "What is the absolute price for the life you stole? Tell me, what is the final transaction?" Liam's eyes were distant, focused on something far beyond the gallery walls. He spoke slowly, carefully choosing words that sounded like philosophy, but held the weight of a decree. "The price is the return to the quiet peace," Liam murmured, his gaze falling back to Aria. "The peace of the grave, Aria. The peace I denied her. How can I ever find rest while I walk this earth, knowing that the very air I breathe was purchased at the cost of her last, struggling gasp?" He paused, letting the silence hang, allowing the chilling implication to settle over her. "The debt is paid when the bankrupt debtor can no longer incur charges," he continued, his tone clinical. "You have taken everything that belonged to Liam Vance, the husband and businessman. Now, you must take the man himself. I accept the full cost of the transaction." Aria felt a sudden sharp chill, far deeper than the air conditioning. Eleanor's frantic warning echoed in her ears. Asterisk. He is talking about the quiet peace of the grave. Asterisk. Aria shook her head slightly, desperately trying to dismiss his statement as hyperbole, the dramatics of a broken man. "Don't threaten suicide, Liam. It won't win you pity. And it certainly won't grant you absolution. That is just another escape." "No," Liam corrected, his tone gentle, but unwavering. "It is not an escape. It is the final, irrevocable fulfillment of my debt. I am not running from the guilt, Aria. I am submitting to the ultimate judgment. Only in eternal sleep can I return to her, and finally ask for the forgiveness I don't deserve." His acceptance was so complete, so devoid of fear, that it momentarily paralyzed Aria. This wasn't the desperate plea of a man looking for a way out. It was the quiet commitment of a man who had already sealed his fate. He was not begging for his life. He was justifying his death. "And what about Chloe?" Aria managed, struggling to keep the conversation grounded. "Are you just going to leave her to face the consequences alone?" Liam gave a humorless laugh. "Chloe is my final failure, not my concern. She will face the courts. She is nothing more than the poison I chose to drink. I will ensure she pays for the lie that killed Lily, but my payment is separate." He took one last look at Aria, his eyes lingering on her rigid, unforgiving posture. "I wanted you to know that I finally see you, Aria. Not the quiet wife, but the grieving mother and the force of justice. You did what you had to do, and I will do what I have to do. Goodbye." He turned and walked toward the gallery entrance, his footsteps unnervingly deliberate. Aria stood motionless, watching him go. The heavy mahogany door swung shut with a muted thud, leaving her alone amidst the cold art. She had achieved total destruction. She had seen his utter brokenness, yet, as Liam's words echoed times, the price is the return to the quiet peace times, a terrifying doubt seized her. She had planned for his ruin, his begging, his public humiliation. She had not planned for his serene, terrifying acceptance of his own annihilation. Did he truly mean it? Was this his final desperate attempt to shock her? Or was this the terrible silent truth? If he took his own life, the debt would be paid, yes, but the finality would be stolen from her. The sense of an earned victory would be contaminated by the violence of self-sacrifice. A sudden sharp flicker of regret pierced her armor. She had wanted him to suffer, but only through life, weighed down by the guilt she had imposed. She had not wanted him to seek the peace he had so coldly denied her daughter. Aria rushed to the large window overlooking the street below, peering down at the black luxury sedan that had been waiting for him. Liam slipped into the driver's seat. He didn't look up. He pulled out into the traffic, driving with a terrifying, single-minded focus. Aria watched the taillights disappear into the stream of city movement, her heart pounding with a cold dread she hadn't anticipated. She was left standing alone, grappling with the unnerving realization that her ultimate revenge might have just culminated in a resolution that was far darker and far more complex than she had ever intended. She had won the war, but the cost, she suddenly suspected, was about to escalate beyond measure. The terrifying silence Liam had left behind in the gallery was shattered by the shrill, frantic cry of a distant phone ringing in Aria's hand. Before she could answer, her focus was abruptly stolen by the jarring cacophony of the city outside her window. The aggressive, erratic horn blast of a car moving too fast, miles away, and completely unaware of Aria's lingering dread. Chloe was driving a leased compact sedan, Emma strapped into the back seat. Chloe had managed to collect Emma from the social worker's temporary custody by exploiting a brief administrative window, a final, desperate grab. Before the courts could issue the definitive protective order, she was a woman running on pure adrenaline and survival instinct, her mind a whirling vortex of fear and vindication. She drove south, away from the city lights and the jurisdiction of Aria's crushing power. Emma, frightened by the speed and her mother's wild-eyed panic, was sobbing silently in the back. "Stop crying, Emma, just stop," Chloe snapped, swerving violently to pass a slow-moving truck. "We are leaving this city. We are leaving that monster behind. We'll go somewhere she can't touch us." Chloe had nothing left to lose. Liam was gone, her reputation was destroyed, and the threat of prison loomed like a black storm cloud. Her driving was reckless, careless, reflecting the chaos inside her. She slammed the accelerator, eager to put distance between herself and the consequences. The highway ahead was dark, hemmed in by dense, silent forest. It was precisely the kind of desolate stretch where a final, private act could occur unnoticed. As she rounded a sharp curve, her headlights caught the sudden, terrifying silhouette of a massive vehicle blocking both lanes ahead. It was a black, heavily armored SUV, Eleanor Vance's private security vehicle, seldom used but instantly recognizable. And behind the wheel was Liam. Chloe slammed on the brakes, the tires squealing in protest. The compact car skidded to a stop barely 10 feet from the massive bumper. "Liam, what the hell are you doing? Move, are you trying to get us killed?" Chloe shrieked, clutching the steering wheel. Liam didn't move. He sat motionless in the driver's seat of the armored car, the engine idling heavily, its lights blinding. He didn't look at Chloe. He looked at his phone, mounted on the dashboard. He had spent the hour since leaving Aria meticulously preparing this final document. He had not sought an easy death, he had sought a useful one. He hit record, his face illuminated by the cold blue light of the screen. His voice, when he spoke, was unnervingly calm, measured, carrying the weight of historical record. "This is a formal and final statement from Liam Vance," he began, his eyes fixed on the camera. Date: October 14th, Location: Highway 19, mile marker 47. Chloe, watching him through the windshield, began to pound her fist against the horn, her panic turning into fury. "Move the car, Liam. Are you completely insane? Let us go." Liam ignored her, his confession rolling out like a death sentence. "I confess to a 3-year pattern of extreme negligence, culminating in the death of my daughter Lily Vance, due to drowning on the morning of August 1st. My negligence was a direct result of being misled by my former partner, Chloe Xiao, who is currently stalled in front of me." He paused, ensuring the camera captured the vehicle clearly. Chloe Xiao fabricated a severe myocardial condition for her daughter, Emma, utilizing fraudulent medical documentation and bribery. This lie manipulated me into prioritizing her fictional emergency over the safety and well-being of Lily. The attached files contain the final, authentic reports confirming Emma's mild, non-threatening condition, and the bank transfers detailing the payments made to Dr. Chen. Liam's expression tightened, the mask of calm momentarily slipping to reveal the profound anguish beneath. "Aria Vance, my wife, has secured financial justice, but the moral debt is mine alone. I now accept the full and final cost of my choice, which is the total dissolution of the life I selfishly clung to. This act is not an escape from guilt, but the final, necessary payment for the life I stole." He ended the recording, his thumb hovering over the send button. He knew Aria had been searching for the evidence of Chloe's criminal conspiracy, and he knew the video, complete with geolocation, timestamp, and a public confession of fraud, would seal Chloe's fate, regardless of what followed. He was ensuring that even in death, his final act served Lily's justice. He selected the files and hit send. The confession and the attached documents flew across the cellular network, destined for Aria Vance's encrypted corporate email, the city attorney's office, and a predetermined cloud archive. Liam looked up from his phone, his gaze finally settling on Chloe. Her face was contorted in terror, realizing the weight of his confession. He met her eyes, silently conveying the finality of his decision. He put the SUV in gear, slowly taking his foot off the brake. Back in her high-rise office, Aria was still standing by the window, desperately trying to call Liam's cell phone, receiving only the cold monotony of his voicemail. His cryptic words echoed in her mind. Asterisk. The price is the return to the quiet peace. Asterisk. Her phone finally rang, displaying Eleanor's frantic contact photo. Aria answered immediately, her voice sharp with rising dread. "Aria, he's gone. He left the storage unit, and he took the car." Eleanor's voice was high-pitched, choked with tears. "What car, Eleanor?" "He had nothing left to drive." "The armored SUV? My late husband's car? The black one with the reinforced chassis? He told the chauffeur he needed it for an emergency pickup hours ago," Eleanor wailed. "I only just realized what he meant." "Aria. That car. It's a tank. If he's driving that, and he's talking about peace and final payments," Eleanor's voice broke into a terrified sob. "He's going to use the car, Aria. He's not going to escape, he's going to commit suicide in a way that ensures maximum damage. Please, you have to stop him." A cold, paralyzing certainty seized Aria. She felt the blood drain from her face as the full horror of Liam's final plan materialized. His death was not meant to be solitary. Asterisk. He will ensure she pays for the lie that killed Lily. Asterisk. Aria's computer chimed, announcing the arrival of a massive encrypted file. Liam's final confession. She opened the email, scanning the timestamp and the sender's note. Asterisk. For Lily, the true cost. Asterisk. She ignored the text of the confession, her eyes snapping to the geolocation data attached to the video file. Asterisk. Highway 19, mile marker 47. Asterisk. The desolate stretch of highway. Aria looked down at the map display on her secondary screen, her mind racing with strategic speed. Liam was driving a reinforced vehicle. Chloe was in a compact sedan. Liam had intercepted Chloe. He had sent the confession to ensure Chloe's criminal liability. And now, he was accepting the full and final cost. It was not merely suicide, It was the execution of justice, paid for with his own life, guaranteeing Chloe's physical and judicial destruction. "He is going to kill her, Eleanor," Aria whispered into the phone, her voice thick with the terrifying realization. "He is going to take her with him. And he will ensure Emma is left behind to witness the wreckage." Aria slammed the phone down. She was already out of her office, Marcus Thorne scrambling to follow. "Marcus, get me a helicopter now. Tell the pilot the destination is Highway 19, mile marker 47, immediate extraction, and call the state police. Tell them there is a high-speed, imminent, fatal collision involving a kidnapping victim." Aria sprinted toward the elevator. The luxurious calm of the conglomerate tower replaced by the frantic, roaring urgency of a mother racing to intercept a final, bi-directional catastrophe. She had driven Liam to total ruin. And now, that ruin was accelerating toward a violent, explosive reckoning. She had achieved the annihilation she sought. But the final, terrible price was still to be paid on the dark asphalt of the highway. The blast of air from the elevator doors slamming shut was the last purely sterile sound Aria would hear for a long time. Marcus Thorne slid to a halt beside her, gripping a satellite phone. "The state police are mobilizing, Madam Vance, but they estimate 15 minutes at best," Marcus reported, his voice tight. 15 minutes is an eternity." Aria clipped, striding toward the rooftop landing pad where the Vance personal transport helicopter idled, its rotors already slicing the night air. "Liam is driving an armored vehicle. He is not planning a crash. He is planning an execution. A compact sedan against that SUV is total annihilation." She strapped into the plush leather seat, the interior luxury jarringly at odds with the frantic speed of their ascent. Below them, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and neon as the pilot banked sharply toward the dark fringe of the suburbs. Aria stared down at the blackness of the highway corridor, her heart pounding a desperate, uneven rhythm against her ribs. She had meticulously orchestrated his ruin, ensuring he faced every consequence while alive, suffering the exquisite torment of his guilt. She had not foreseen this final violent leap. Liam was not giving her the measured, controlled closure of a life spent in penance. He was forcing a horrifying, chaotic climax that robbed her of her clean victory. Asterisk. "You will not steal this final moment of justice from me, Liam." Asterisk, she thought. Her teeth clenched. Asterisk, "You will not find peace." Asterisk, the pilot's voice crackled over the headset. "Target confirmed. Approximately 3 miles ahead. Visible obstruction on the highway. 3 miles. Seconds." Liam sat in the driver's seat of the massive black SUV, his gaze fixed on the terrified, sputtering compact car trapped by his sudden blockade. Chloe was screaming, her mouth moving in silent fury behind the tinted glass, occasionally hitting the horn, a useless, pathetic bleat against the silence of the forest night. Emma, dimly visible in the rearview, was a small, shaking shadow. Liam's chest was hollow, his mind utterly calm. He felt neither hatred for Chloe nor pity for Emma. He felt only the profound, unbearable weight of the debt he was about to extinguish. He reached into his wallet, pulling out the small, crumpled photograph of Lily, bright and laughing by the pool. "I'm coming home, sweetheart," he whispered, pressing the photo gently against the dashboard. "I pay the price now." He took one last, shuddering breath, filling his lungs with the cold air. He had no remorse for the violence he was about to unleash upon Chloe. She was merely the collateral damage of his atonement. She had provided the lie, and he had made the fatal choice. Both must now cease to exist in this narrative of deceit. He lifted his foot from the brake and slammed the accelerator to the floor. The heavy, reinforced SUV roared, its engine unleashing a deep, visceral sound of pure, unbridled power. The vehicle surged forward, a speeding instrument of final judgment, gaining momentum with horrifying swiftness. Chloe saw the intent in his eyes, the terrifying, empty resolve that was colder than any rage. She screamed, a primal sound of pure, helpless terror, yanking the steering wheel wildly to the side, searching desperately for an escape route that did not exist. "Daddy, no!" Emma shrieked from the back seat. The child's voice, a thin, terrible thread of sound, cut instantly short by the overwhelming sound of the crash. The impact was not a glancing blow. It was a head-on, deliberate collision designed for maximum destruction. The armored chassis of the SUV met the lightweight frame of the sedan with the terrifying crunch times of tearing metal, splintering glass, and exploding airbags. The force of the impact was immense, throwing the sedan backward into the deep ditch beside the highway, crumpling the front end of the compact car like a discarded aluminum can. Inside the SUV, the heavy momentum snapped Liam's body forward against the restraint system, but the secondary impact forces, channeled through the steel, were catastrophic. The reinforced interior was his final tomb. There was no sound of a struggle, only a brief, sickening thud against the interior paneling. Silence fell, absolute and immediate, broken only by the distant, high-pitched whine of the compact car's alarm system beginning its useless cry. Steam rose from the wreckage, thick and white against the pitch black of the highway. Aria saw it from above, a sudden blinding flash of light, followed by the sight of two mangled shapes lying in the darkness. "Put us down now!" Aria shouted into the headset, her voice cracking with fierce urgency. "Set us down immediately!" The helicopter flared, its landing lights cutting through the darkness, illuminating the scene of devastation. The scent of hot oil, gasoline, and burnt rubber assaulted Aria's senses as the pilot set the skids down 50 feet from the wreckage. Aria flung the door open and sprinted toward the mangled vehicles, the roar of the descending police sirens already growing deafeningly close. She ran first to the black SUV, the executioner's car. The airbag had deployed, but the cabin was compromised. She peered through the broken windshield. Liam was slumped forward, utterly motionless, the impact having delivered the final, irreversible verdict. There was no pulse, no breath, no sign of life. His face, still calm in death, wore the unnerving expression of a man who had finally found the peace he had sought. Aria reached out, her hand hovering inches from the glass, confirming the devastating truth. He was gone. He had paid the ultimate price. Aria pulled herself away, her gaze cold and fixed, then turned toward the wreck of Chloe's sedan, now lying at a severe angle in the ditch. Paramedics were already scrambling down the embankment, pulling instruments from their bags. "Get back, Madam Vance," a police officer yelled, struggling to keep up with her relentless pace. Chloe was half-pinned beneath the destroyed dashboard, screaming hysterically, not in pain, but in rage and disbelief. Her leg was clearly broken, bent at an impossible angle, and her face was masked in blood and dust. She was alive, battered and broken, but alive. "Liam, you bastard, you tried to kill us!" Chloe shrieked, sobbing uncontrollably. Aria ignored her, her focus snapping to the back seat. Emma, protected by the child restraint system but severely traumatized, was being carefully lifted out by a paramedic. The child was conscious, crying weakly, covered in tiny shards of glass, but her life had been spared. Liam had ensured the impact killed him and maimed Chloe, but had failed, or deliberately managed, to kill Emma. Aria watched the chaos, the flashing blue and red lights, the frantic activity of the paramedics, Chloe's screaming, the sight of Liam's still body, and she felt nothing that resembled victory. The rage that had fueled her for 2 months suddenly vanished, leaving behind a cold, desolate vacuum. She had wanted Liam to be destroyed, ruined, annihilated, and he had complied, fulfilling the debt with a savagery she had never truly anticipated. He had stolen the final satisfaction from her, substituting her slow, calculated justice with his own horrific climax. Aria sank onto her knees on the asphalt, heedless of the broken glass and oil. The war was over. The lie had been exposed. The guilty were punished. Liam was dead. Chloe was facing criminal charges and catastrophic injuries. Lily's sacrifice had been avenged. But as the police officers swarmed the wreckage, sealing the site of the grim execution, Aria felt only the terrifying weight of the silence. She had sought justice, but all she had achieved was a monumental, televised tragedy, a victory bought at the price of a husband's violent self-immolation. She looked up at the dark, indifferent sky. The helicopter blades beating rhythmically above her. She had won everything. And yet, in the heart-stopping silence of the highway, she realized she was left with absolutely nothing but the crushing emptiness that the final payment had created. The high-speed collision site quickly devolved from a scene of catastrophic violence into a sterile procedural investigation. Aria did not leave the highway until the two mangled cars had been towed away, and Liam's body had been formally identified and placed under the jurisdiction of the medical examiner. She stood calmly, giving a precise, emotionally detached statement to the state police, confirming Liam's identity and providing the evidence necessary to ensure the immediate legal consequences for Chloe. Liam's final video confession, automatically routed through Aria's corporate servers, was a meticulous piece of self-immolation. It not only detailed his own negligence but provided irrefutable proof of Chloe's medical fraud and bribery of Dr. Chen. The clarity of his final statement, recorded seconds before his death, removed any ambiguity. This was not a tragic accident, but a premeditated, final act of justice, paid for with his life, and strategically aimed at his betrayer. Within 48 hours, the legal net was drawn tight. Chloe, hospitalized with multiple severe fractures and internal injuries, was immediately served with warrants for grand fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and endangerment of a minor. The emotional devastation of the crash, compounded by the loss of Liam, her protective shield, left her utterly defenseless against the onslaught of the state attorney's office, who now possessed Liam's posthumous, damning testimony. Dr. Chen was arrested the following morning while attempting to liquidate his offshore assets. The banking records provided in Liam's final data dump proving conclusive. Aria, using the full legal and investigative resources of the Vance conglomerate, ensured that there were no loopholes, no plea bargains, and no opportunity for either Chloe or the corrupt physician to escape the maximum penalty. The public scandal was immediate and overwhelming. The media, already obsessed with the fall of Vance Holdings, now feasted on the story of the love triangle that ended in murder-suicide, and exposed a devastating medical fraud. Chloe Xiao became a symbol of societal duplicity, utterly ruined by her own ambition and the man she had manipulated to his death. Emma, the innocent centerpiece of the conspiracy, was placed permanently under the guardianship of a trusted member of the Vance Foundation's Child Welfare Division, safe from her mother's desperate, manipulative embrace. The only remaining piece of the dreadful accounting was the physical remains of Liam Vance. Eleanor Vance, Liam's mother, tried one last desperate maneuver. She contacted Aria, demanding the right to give her son a grand, public burial befitting the family name, away from the shameful headlines. Aria met Eleanor not in her office, but in the sterile, quiet confines of the funeral home, where Liam's body was being prepared. "I am making the arrangements, Eleanor," Aria stated, standing over the closed casket, her voice cold and unyielding. "I am his wife." "Wife? You destroyed him. You drove him to this." Eleanor spat, her grief battling her fury. "You will not deny him the dignity of a proper burial." Aria turned, her eyes fixed on the grieving mother. Dignity? Liam forfeited his dignity when he abandoned his child to save a lie. His final act was an act of violence, not valor. He used an armored car to attempt the murder of the woman who provided his escape, and in doing so, he paid his debt. He recognized the full cost. Aria paused, softening her voice only slightly to deliver the final verdict. "Liam will not be buried in the family mausoleum. He will not lie among the Vances who lived with integrity. He will be buried in the garden of the house he abandoned, right beside the small white stone marker that bears Lily's name." Eleanor stared, horrified. "You want him to lie in the shadow of his guilt? That is savage, Aria." "It is not savagery, Eleanor. It is atonement," Aria countered. Liam chose his final purpose. He chose to die. Not to escape, but to pay the debt. His grave will be the ultimate, perpetual reminder that his choice resulted in the loss of his life and his daughter's life. He will spend eternity at the place of his crime, in silent vigil over the grave of the child he sacrificed. Eleanor realized the futility of arguing. Aria's justice was complete, unforgiving, and terrifyingly precise. She left, broken and defeated, accepting the finality of Aria's decree. The burial was a small, silent affair. Only Aria and a small contingent of legal staff attended. The grave was dug deep in the corner of the sprawling estate garden. A few feet from where Lily's marker stood a small white monument bearing the simple inscription, * Lily Vance, * 6 years old. Loved, *. Aria stood over the newly turned earth. The scent of damp soil and fresh flowers heavy in the air, the sounds of the world, the market reports, the political chatter. Chloe's furious courtroom denials seemed muffled and distant. She looked from Lily's stone to the mound that covered Liam. He was home, he was in his final place of penance, forever bound to the child he had traded for his pride. Aria felt no triumph. The exquisite, burning rage that had sustained her for months had been extinguished by the violence of the crash, leaving behind a profound, terrifying void. She had achieved every objective. Liam was ruined and dead. Chloe was facing a lifetime of consequences, and the truth of Lily's death was public record. But justice, she realized, was a cold, empty vessel. It demanded payment, it inflicted pain, but it could not resurrect the laughter of a 6-year-old girl, or erase the image of a small hand sinking beneath the water. Aria sat down on the grass between the two graves, her hand resting lightly on the cold stone of Lily's marker. The sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the spot where the inflatable unicorn had once bobbed. Aria Vance, daughter of the conglomerate, a force that had shattered a life and rebuilt an empire of vengeance. She commanded billions, she controlled fates, and she had witnessed the absolute payment of a devastating debt. Yet, here, kneeling in the quiet garden, she was simply a mother, utterly alone. The revenge had been successful, clinical, and complete. It had also been fundamentally useless. The hole in her heart, created by the loss of Lily, was not filled by the absence of Liam. It remained vast, cold, and eternal. What is the purpose now? The silent voice of the narrator whispered in the emptiness. The war is over, but the future is only silence. Aria did not answer the question. She simply closed her eyes, remembering the feel of Lily's light weight in her arms. The work was finished, the debt was settled, but peace remained a distant, unobtainable commodity, reserved only for the silent sleepers beneath the earth. Her purpose had ended the moment Liam's SUV met the sedan. She had to find a new one, a constructive one, perhaps to justify the remaining years of her life. She stood up, brushing the dirt from her impeccable suit. She would continue the work of the Vance Foundation, focusing its vast resources on protecting vulnerable children, ensuring that no other small life was lost to the negligence of self-absorbed adults. It was a cold, distant purpose, devoid of emotion, but necessary. Aria took one last look at the twin graves. The price had been paid. The only legacy that remained was the hard-won, devastating truth. Vengeance, once consumed, leaves only ashes in the mouth.